Hello and welcome to the Walk Off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford. We have a very special episode for you this morning. So excited to have returning to the show one half of the At the Letters podcast, Blue Jays insider, writer, and analyst for Sportsnet, Ben Nicholson Smith. Welcome back to the show, man.
Scott, thank you. It's great to be talking to you, and it's been too long. Hopefully, some interesting times for the Jays ahead here. Although it's been pretty quiet so far, but great to be talking with you, and thanks for the invitation.
Man, it is so funny how I honestly tricked myself into thinking that this season would move faster than last off season, and that has not been the case at all. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
seriously, it is. It's testing everyone's patience.
So before we dive into things, I will say always enjoy your content. I really do like what you do. Really enjoyed yours and Arden's latest at the letters. I know that was what 5, 6 days ago. I think you put it out, but really thorough stuff. I really enjoyed your article too, where you're kind of breaking down the different off roads the Blue Jays could take over this off season and kind of broke down the budget there. So great work as usual. And you also we got to watch you on the biggest stage in baseball this offseason. You were doing your thing at playoffs games. How was that, man?
It was honestly so fun. Yeah, the playoffs are always an amazing time. And previously, my coverage of the playoffs had been really focused around the Blue Jays, of course. And Blue Jays playoffs, I mean, it's so intense. Obviously, for the Toronto media market, for Sportsnet, it's a huge deal. For my friends, for my family, it's a big deal when the
Yeah,
Blue Jays are in the playoffs, right? But this year, covering the Yankees, the Guardians, the Dodgers, it was incredible. It was so cool, just on a different stage, a different scale. Honestly, when you're talking about Dodgers, Yankees, I'd never covered a game with so many media members. It was so intense. It was so cool. To be
that
there for
was
the
my
clinching
first thought
moments.
watching you, man. Was like, I wonder if he's done anything even close to this before. So the answer is no on that.
No, I mean, it just as far as like the sheer number of individuals there, right? Producers, camera operators, of course, you have sound technicians, you have writers, you have everything. It was just to the point where if I wanted to get a drink of water at Yankee Stadium's, press box, I'm like lining up. You go to use the washroom, you go to like pick up some game notes. It's like you're lining up for everything because it was so packed, and I'm just not used to that. Like it was a huge volume, reflecting the interest, of course, in that World Series, which was a great World Series.
It
Great
really
matchup,
was.
and we want to see small market teams in there sometimes too, but there's nothing wrong with having the big market teams, fight on the biggest stage every once in a while.
I was so against it when it first happened, right? I'm an underdog fan through and through. I can't help myself. But watching the star power that World Series had, I don't think in my fandom of watching baseball 30 some plus years that I can remember that sort of series. Like it was just packed with the biggest stars in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. So you really couldn't go an inning without having some sort of huge star. Like I guess, maybe you get to like the Verdugo, Austin Wells pocket of the batting order. All right, we're not talking mega stars, but you know, I would say 2/3 of the time you're looking at, oh, Juan Soto just hit, or oh, Shohei Ohtani's on deck, and it's just Freddie Freeman, the series that he had. So
Yeah.
it was really cool, and I think the teams that get that far, they're there for a reason. They do a lot of things really, really well, not just on the field, but their preparation, their roster construction, the way they communicate, the way they deal with media. It was really fascinating to see some of that stuff up close, and ultimately to see the Dodgers win it all.
I will say, as a Blue Jays fan, watching those teams play did make me feel a sense of jealousy and longing, right? And it also kind of opened my eyes to, are we as far away as it feels? Because watching those two teams, I was like, the Blue Jays are so far from this caliber of baseball. So let's dive into the Blue Jays. Let's start with pitching here. Obviously, we'll get into the speculation around Max Fried and Corbin Burns and stuff like that. But let's start with the Scotty Mitchell report from TSN yesterday that kind of surfaced that the Jays were all in on Roki Sasaki and that they have an existing relationship with him already and are planning quite a pitch. Now, obviously, we can pretty much say that there's 29 other teams in baseball that are going to be all in on Roki Sasaki. But I'm curious what you've heard on this and where you would say the Blue Jays' chances rank, being you look at the landscape and think obviously the Dodgers are the favorite, but maybe they're not. It's tough to like really read what a kid like that wants out of where he lands.
Right. And it's probably not going to be driven by money, or else he'd wait 2 years. So,
Hmm.
we're talking more about professional opportunity, personal taste in, whatever it is, geography, culturally, that kind of fit is all going to play a role in determining where he wants to go. Clearly, the Dodgers are a team to watch. The Padres probably are the favorites. If it's not the Dodgers, it's probably the Padres who are the favorites. But this is a player that the Blue Jays have scouted extensively in person with multiple top executives from the Blue Jays going over to watch Roki Sasaki pitch in Japan in person, including Ross Atkins, who's gone multiple times to see him. And, obviously you're going to like what you see when you have a 20, how old is he? 23, throwing
23.
100, yeah, 100 miles an hour. This is a very accomplished pitcher too. He's done it at a high level, and had really good results. So, yeah, this is the kind of building block type pitcher that every team wants. The Blue Jays, of course, would want to sign him. I do expect they'll pursue him, and where that leads, I don't know. But this is a really dynamic pitcher.
So the fact that they have laid a bit of a relationship there, do you think it's safe to say not every organization has done that? Like the Blue Jays are one of, I don't, to put a number to it, I don't know, but half a dozen to a dozen teams. I can imagine not all 30 teams were sending over scouts and their general manager to Japan to watch this kid play.
Yeah, I think that that's probably fair. And I think if you said the Blue Jays are one of the top 6 to 12 teams to sign Roki Sasaki, I would agree with that. Ballpark, I haven't listed them out 1 by 30, but that seems pretty fair. I wouldn't put them as favorites. I would put Dodgers and Padres ahead of everyone else, but the Jays are serious about him as they should be.
It is interesting the way you brought that up too, that if he just waited 2 years to be a free agent, there would be a major, major bidding war happening right now. I mean, we just watched it go down with Yamamoto in LA with the Dodgers last off season. Curious, obviously you don't know. So this is just speculation, but curious what would motivate a 23-year-old to maybe push a big payday down the road. Obviously, a lot of confidence in himself that it's going to come to him at one point or another. Um, and he must. I guess my question, Ben, is the view of major leagues from Japanese players, is it shifting a little? Is it becoming more and more of the place they want to be? Whereas maybe even 10 years ago, you know what, being a professional ball player in Japan was the goal?
Yeah, I think that I think we're seeing now a huge amount of Japanese stars having great success, in Major League Baseball, and obviously that's led by Shohei Ohtani, but it's not just him; it's Yamamoto and others. And I think that there's a clear pathway for much more success. Japan is obviously one of the best baseball developing countries in the world. They do an incredible job at developing young players who have the skills to play in Major League Baseball and to thrive in Major League Baseball. So, others could probably speak better than me on how that shifted over time, but I think that yeah, this is a huge opportunity, and it is interesting because as for Sasaki's motivations, clearly there's a level of professional ambition here where it's not just financial ambition, but it's he wants to succeed, he wants to test himself, he wants to thrive at the highest level and do it as soon as possible. And if that means sacrificing a lot of money, then he's still willing to do that. And that's the path that Otani chose as well, where Otani was happy to sign with the Angels for much, much less than he would have signed for if he had waited until he was 25. So in both cases, we're seeing players who are motivated by things other than money and motivated by the chance to succeed and be the best and prove themselves. And that's a really cool thing. I mean, hey, I'm not going to judge any player who wants money. I get it. But at the same time, I think it's really cool when a player is motivated by just being the best and by the love of the game and the challenge of facing off against really good competitors.
It's incredibly cool to see. And I think it does go to show you that there is a lot of money to be made from Japanese players in sponsorship and marketing sort of stuff, in merch and that sort of thing. That maybe if you were to look at non American players from other countries, just doesn't exist. And it's kind of cool to watch Otani have been the force that he was and kind of blazing that trail because I we'll need to wait and see. But it feels like that's open now. That's a door that we're just going to see more and more Japanese players coming through and more of them being superstars at a major league level.
Yeah, I mean it's been awesome to watch Otani. Obviously, I mean just one of the probably the dominant storyline in baseball for the last 5 years has been the emergence of Otani. This is the central player in Major League Baseball. For him to be Japanese, we saw the TV numbers in Japan, just incredible interest in the sport. Of course, it's a global game that extends beyond Japan, but that is culturally, clearly very important. Yeah, I mean, Shohei Otani is just one of a kind. So it's cool to see how far his impact stretches and how deep that impact runs in Japan.
All right, Ben, let's take this enthusiasm and those smiles and just turn them down here because we're going to talk the Blue Jays bullpen, which has been just a mess. I honestly did not see this coming. If you were to have asked me where I thought the Blue Jays bullpen would rank last offseason this time, I would have said it would have been a top half bullpen. I honestly believe that. Definitely did not see them being the worst bullpen in baseball coming. I mean, it was so bad that even Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro singled it out in their press conferences after the season. So bullpens are weird because a very bad bullpen literally the next year could be just fine. So my question to you is, what does this organization need to do for their bullpen to be just fine in 2025?
Yeah, they're going to have to make some serious additions. I think that's the obvious answer that we would probably all agree on. Because at this point they've only cut Jordan Romano and
Yeah.
Genesis Cabrera and Dylan Tate, right? So there's definitely a possibility of a reunion with Romano. That's in play. At the same time, they're going to have to go beyond, and this is the tricky thing, right? This offseason, they're trying to add hitting. They want to add to their rotation, but you can't ignore the bullpen. And
Mm-hmm.
barring some sort of exceptional outlay of cash for Juan Soto, they're going to juggle this and probably end up somewhere around the CBT number for 2025, which is 241 million. So let's say they have 38, 39, something like that in the millions to work with. You start adding that up for a hitter and a pitcher, then you start looking at the bullpen. They might have to look for some bargains there. So not only do they have to fill this bullpen out, and not only do they have to build significant depth, both right-handers and left-handers, velo, spin, you're going to need the whole mix, right? And yet
Mm-hmm.
they might have to do it on something of a budget. So it's going to be really threading a needle. They can't ignore this, but they might have to find some talent on minor league deals. They might have to find some talent on waivers, as well as obviously spending on major league free agents and potentially trades and doing basically pulling on every lever that they possibly can because objectively this was just one of the worst bullpens in Major League Baseball last year, and that cannot be repeated if they're going to have a chance of contending.
This, I think, is why there is so much anxiety amongst the fan base, is that it really does seem as though there are many different routes, and you wrote about this, that this front office could take. We just talked about it feels like they're in a budget crunch. It really does, right? Like $38 million to bolster the holes that this team has. It doesn't feel like enough money.
Mm-hmm.
That said, the headline that is dominating MLB.com right now and getting the most attention says widespread belief Blue Jays will be highest bidder in Soto sweepstakes. So it's like, what?
Yeah,
Like,
I
what is the
mean,
answer?
look, I mean, we'll see, right? I don't know. I don't have access to like Mark Shapiro's outbound emails. I
Mhm.
don't know what that says for offers to Scott Boras and Juan Soto. Okay. That being said, the people that I've spoken to would be very surprised if the Blue Jays are somehow driving this thing on Juan Soto. I just, the conversations that I've had suggest it's the Mets who are
Hmm.
going to be the team that is driving this. And I don't know, maybe I'm talking to the wrong people, but the
I mean,
people
it
I'm
makes
talking
all the
to,
sense in the world. I mean, Cohen's kind of been the cowboy of the
right.
Wild West the last few days, right? Or last few
Well,
years, I should say. So,
yeah. And, I just, the people I'm talking to are not sitting here and saying, yeah, the Blue Jays are going to be the high bidder for Juan Soto. Are they going to be involved? Yes, they are involved. They have made Juan Soto an offer. They'll probably potentially make him another offer. So they want Juan Soto, but I don't get the sense that it's like that they're in some sort of auction where they're always going to keep raising their hand and upping the bids. I think that you look at their history as an organization and they're pretty measured, they're pretty disciplined. I don't think that they're going to just get on this roller coaster and ride it to the end at all costs. So again, that's speculative, but I read those reports with a grain of salt. And
mhm.
I am not sitting here thinking that the Blue Jays are just going to go out there and sign Juan Soto. Are they going to? They're going to add a hitter. They're going to add a pitcher. They're going to add to their team. But I think the Mets should still be viewed as the favorite for Juan Soto.
So I think it's safe to say, and this is one thing that not everyone in Blue Jays fandom agrees on, but I do think it's safe to say that the Blue Jays, if you're prepared to make an offer for 700 million for Shohei Ohtani, you have to be prepared to pay it, even if everyone's saying they were just used as leverage. Blah blah blah. You can't just put that offer out there and be like, "Well, we know he's going to pick the Dodgers, and this gets us off the hook," right? I think same thing goes if you're going to make an offer for $620 million for Juan Soto, you are prepared to pay that money. And then at the same time, you look at the 2025 budget and you go, well, you're pulling at your collar going, well, they really only have 38 million. They got a ton of holes. Then you start, you pull the microscope out a little bit and you're like, they don't have much on the books after 2025 and even almost nothing on the books after 2026. So your article touched on this from last week, but it's just like there are so many different ways that this team could go at right now. And I know you mentioned a bat is the big hole. They've been in need of a cleanup hitter for, in my opinion, 2 years now.
Yeah.
And the two big ones on the market are Teoscar Hernandez, former Blue Jay, right? And then you got Anthony Santander. If you're picking between those two, Ben, do you have a preference?
Um, Honestly, on performance, if you look at their WAR and if you look at their WRC plus for the last 3 years, as I'm sure you have, like they're very, very comparable. They're
Mm-hmm.
both around 123 WRC plus. They've both been like 3 WAR players the last few years. So, Santander's younger. So all things being equal, I would take Santander. But Santander is probably going to require a 4 or 5 year commitment. Teoscar, it might be more like 3. So, I think you look at it and you look at the price, and that's going to inform which way you go. But just to add on to your kind of preamble there, I think your read on the situation is very fair, Scott. Like I think that everything you're saying is like, it is a challenging off season for them, and hey, could this work? Could they pull it off? Yeah, I mean, there's 3 wildcard berths. Like they could pull it off, but it's going to be really tough. It's not an easy challenge to overcome here. They have to improve their team significantly in a lot of ways, and the Soto thing is unlikely, in my opinion, based on the conversations I've had. But I can see the appeal, right? Because that's like 7 WAR from one move. You start looking at how do you add 5, 6, 7, 8 WAR otherwise. Like it's tough because Teo, Santander, those guys might be 2 or 3 win players. Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, they might be a 2 or 3 win player. Okay, great,
Mm-hmm.
you're at 5 WAR. How do you add another 2 or like this is the appeal of Soto in a lot of ways, is he does so many things for you from one roster spot. You pair him with any other elite hitter, be it Devers, be it Lindor, be it Vladdy in that scenario, and you're in a really good spot. So, he is rightfully getting all this hype. And I think that if someone spends 675 million on Soto, I am not going to sit here and say it's a bad deal because he is a special player. But, you start looking at how to backfill and it gets really tough because, it's, there are only so many good players to go around. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of teams have interest in those guys.
So I know you're running out of time here, so I won't keep you too much longer. I've got one or two listener questions we'll get to, but let's end this little ramble here on everyone's biggest fear, which is that this front office just doesn't pull off the offseason they need to um, make their lip service truthful and that they're going to contend in 2025. In which case, Shapiro's contract is up at the end of 2025. I mean, Atkins has one more year, but if Shapiro's gone, Atkins is gone. And then you're facing that dreaded R word, right? The rebuild. This is an actual fear, right? Like, this is not irrational from the fan base. Or do you think that this is something that maybe we should all reel in just a little bit, that that's not staring us down the face here?
Oh yeah, I think that's entirely rational.
Okay.
As all of your questions have been so far, as per usual, and I'm sure the fan questions will be as well. But no, that's reasonable, right? Like, here's the one saving grace is to compete in Major League Baseball in this day and age when you have 3 wildcard teams per league and you have 12 total teams making the playoffs. You don't have to be a juggernaut, and the Detroit Tigers would underscore that. The
Mm-hmm.
Diamondbacks from a couple years ago would. You
Mm-hmm.
can look at every year of the playoffs, and there are teams that aren't amazing that get in and have a shot. But
Sure, every
no
AL
one,
Central team.
exactly. And look, at the same time, let's not move the goalposts, right? The goal should not be to get in. The goal should be to win a World Series. And the goal when Mark Shapiro started talking to Blue Jays fans when he first got this job in 2015 was to win World Series championships. So I am not going to move the goalposts and say, oh, yeah, maybe they can make the playoffs. That's not the goal. That should not be the goal if you're a Major League Baseball franchise. The goal should be to win. The Jays are not close to winning at all. They're right now, they're not close to getting into the playoffs. So step one, you got to get in. I think there's a pathway to that, even if it's going to be challenging. But man, getting in is only step one because you have to win 4
Mm-hmm.
playoff rounds, right? Against good teams when the stakes are highest. So it's going to be tough. I mean, no one follows Major League Baseball thinking it's going to be easy. I think we all know that. But yeah, it's going to be tough. And yeah, I you can't sit here and rule out a rebuild. And maybe the time will come where that's actually a good thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
if they go through this year and they kind of sputter along, man, you've got to turn this thing around at a certain point and be really honest about where you are as an organization. So it's not going to happen soon, but there might be a time for that.
I sure hope that all of my negativity and thoughts that this front office hasn't done what they should do, I wind up eating my words. Like, there's nothing
Yeah,
I would love more, Ben, than at the end of 2025 to be like, you know what? Atkins really had it right, and I can't believe I didn't trust the process.
yeah, I hear you.
All right, I'll get you out of here. Here, a couple listener questions for you. Patricia messaged us on Twitter from Saskatchewan. She says, "Hey Ben, love your work and that you're doing the walk off. Curious what your thoughts are on John Schneider. Has he been a good enough manager that if he loses his job at the end of this off season or at the end of this season, he could get hired elsewhere?"
Well, thanks for the question, Patricia, and thank you for reading. First of all, I actually think John Schneider will definitely manage with another team if the Blue Jays were to move on from him. I think that he's he's got skills. He has real skills that, like, because we think of this manager as like this kind of like, it's this sort of like nebulous job in a way. And they're this figurehead in a way. But of course, to be a manager, you have to actually have specific skills, right? Like talking to umpires is a skill, talking to coaches is a skill, talking to players, understanding late game strategy, understanding, Major League Baseball rules. Like the rules that I kind of gloss over and I let Dan and Buck talk about them. And I just kind of like, don't get too into the details. Like understanding the rules is so obvious, but like as a Major League manager, you have to know the rules in and out. Schneider has those skills. Now, has it led to the results that the Blue Jays fans would like? No, obviously not. But I personally, my honest answer is I think he's going to be a good Major League manager. That might be with the Blue Jays. They have some problems with their roster that they need to solve for that to happen. So there's a chance it happens elsewhere. But I think John Schneider is going to be a good manager. And I think he already is, has some skills. And I think there's going to be even more growth to come for him as a Major League manager.
All right, Ben, your last question. Again, we so appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Always love chatting baseball with you, my guy. SCTI in our Discord says, ask BNS, who is the life of the Sportsnet Christmas party?
Oh man, that's amazing. Oh wow. You know, who's the life of the party? I wouldn't necessarily know. I tend to be pretty quiet at those things. Like I tend to, grab a club soda and stand in the corner of the room and chat with a few people. So I'm not necessarily like flipping tables or anything like
Right.
that. But um, yeah, I don't know. I love catching up with my colleagues at those things in a setting where you don't have a pressure of work. Last year, I'll tell you this, last year at the Christmas party, my colleagues, David, Singh, Sunny, Shy, we were all standing around and we were having a really good conversation about books. And our favorite books. So that's I know that
I love
sounds
it.
like really um, that sounds so boring. People are like, "Get me out of here." They're
Yeah.
already skipping ahead. They're done. But that's the honest answer. I don't.
Yeah.
Who's the life of the party? I don't like. I don't know. Like JD Bunkus is usually like a fun guy to talk
Bunkus.
to with
Okay,
those
that makes
things. He's
sense.
got
Yeah.
takes, right?
Yeah.
If you, I'll tell you this: you run into Bunkus and Sam McKee at a Christmas party, you're having a good time. That's a good
Awesome.
conversation to be in.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks again, Ben. I'll let you get out of here. What's your cat's name?
Lou.
Lou. All right. We keep seeing the tail. So I know this is
Yeah,
going to be something that we get comments in YouTube. So there you go. Lou, Ben's cat. There you
that's
go.
right. Thanks so much,
Awesome.
Scott. Great to join you, and great questions as always. Glad to talk Jays, and hey, who knows what the next few months will bring? But I'm sure we'll get the chance, hopefully, to talk again at some point.
I look forward to the next time, my guy. Thank you so much.